Hello, everyone, and welcome to Reply All, where we explore fascinating moments in history. I'm Karlton Peter, and my co host is Jakayla Castle. We are going to dive into the Holocaust and what caused it. The Holocaust is an important topic to learn about because it encourages students and other people to promote human rights and justice. How does the Holocaust encourage students to promote human justice?
Because you have to be ready to face hate in all of its shapes and do something if you think something bad is going on. It also improves students' critical thinking skills and encourages you to stand up for those who are being attacked. Study teaches you that remaining silent is dangerous. We are going to explore the Holocaust, which was very important because people were and still are facing discrimination and dehumanization. The Holocaust originated in the stab in the back myth, which was the belief the German army did not lose the First World War on the battleground that was betrayed by elements within their nation. What was stab in the back about?
The stab in the back myth was the idea that the German army was mistreated by communist, socialist, and Jewish elements within Germany. This event became known as the Bear Hall Putsch. After this happened, they had a hard time recovering from the devastation which was caused by World War I after it ended in 1918. The origins of the Holocaust can be found in 1933, and by the end in 1945, it had changed the world, killing about 6 million Jews and countless other undesirable people such as invalids, gypsies, Romans, and many other monetary groups were killed. It caused long-lasting demographic and cultural changes in all of Europe. The Holocaust got its name by Khan Greek, meaning burnt offering or sacrifice to a god. Hitler and the Nazis party unsuccessfully tried to overthrow the Weimar Republic in the Bear Hall Putsch. However, after several more years of economic hardship, the Nazis were successful in taking over the government democratically. The Nazis soon took complete control of the government and passed laws turning the nation into a dictatorship under Adolf Hitler.
Quickly, the Nazis passed laws against their supposed enemies. The laws for the re-establishment of the civil service prohibited Jews from holding positions in civil services, universities, and the state. The first wave of Nazis' anti-Semitic legislation was from 1933 to 1934. It was September 1935. The Nazis' leaders announced that the Nuremberg Laws were institutionalized many of these racial theories. During the years 1937 to 1938, it increased the segregation of the Jews from their fellow Germans. That made them identify themselves in many ways that would separate them from the rest of the Jews. That focused more on limiting the participation of the Jews in German life. There were also public burnings of books authored by Jews, political rebels, and other individuals not authorized by the government. Karlton, how were the civil service prohibited Jews from holding positions in civil services?
To demonstrate that they had no Jews ancestors, every member of the civil service would need to be able to provide evidence of their Aryan heritage.
The Holocaust was caused by the Nazis who wanted to exterminate the Jews and considered the border context of old age hostility towards Jews, modern racism, and nationalism.
There are several notable examples in history of Jews being scapegoated or blamed for a problem that they are not at fault for. During the plague pandemic in the 1350, the Jews were expelled, and after the assassination of Tsar Alexander II in 1881, there were outbreaks of violence in which groups of Jews were mistreated or murdered. Racism against Jews in Europe had occurred for thousands of years and came to the surface in hard times.
In 1918, Germany lost the First World War, which right-wing extremists blamed the Jews and accused them for being capitalist exploiters, which they follow of communism, who were world domination by means of a revolution. As the Weimar Republic faced more and more economic hardship, it allowed these voices to grow. This led to Nazis being democratically elected into power in 1933.
Using the fire and the Reactionary, the Nazi leadership and the alliance's partners stated that communists were preparing a bloody outrage. They asserted that in order to stop this, emergency legislation were required. On April 1, 1933, the Nazi boycott of Jewish businesses began. Even though it was mostly effective because the German people still supported Jewish-owned companies, it did expose the Nazis' intention to make it harder for Jews to survive in Germany. At first, it was merely about segregating the Jews, but as the war progressed, Germany took more and more territory with Jews. They needed a new solution, a final solution.
The final solution was a result of the new National Socialist government's early action against the Jews of Germany. It was owned by the state campaign of systematic looting, increasing harassment, arrests, forced ownership transferred to Nazi Party activists, and the murder of Jewish company owners. Karlton, when did the final solution actually begin?
The Jews were murdered by the Nazis, or they died as a discriminatory and were against the Jews during the initial years of the Third Reich. Concentration camps are places where people stay without being given a chance to defend themselves. While this isn't always the case, prisoners often get mistreated for their labor and housed in poor conditions. Germany's earliest concentration camps began as jails for supposed enemies of the state. Communists and other political prisoners made up a great deal of those individuals at first, but Jehovah's Witnesses, gays, Roma, and so-called asocials soon came. How many were there?
There were about 44,000 camps in Germany and areas that they conquered.
Do you know where they were located?
Most camps were located in Poland, Germany, and Western Russia. In the Nazi concentration camps, prison was typically permanent, although some individuals were initially released in a matter of days. Many of them remained held for weeks, months, or even years. In every camp, the facilities and sanitation were poor. Torture, humiliation, brutal abuse were common. Forced labor was another commonplace among prisoners in concentration camps. Long days of physical demanding work were normal, though this varied from camp to camp. Prisoners in several camps were forced to work themselves to death.
Auschwitz has become a symbol for terror and genocide. Established in Germany in 1940, in the suburbs of Auschwitz, a Polish city that was annexed to the Third Reich by the Nazis. On June 14, 1940, Poles were increasing mass arrests beyond the capacity of exceeding local prisons and transports of Poles reached KL Auschwitz from Tarnow. Auschwitz I was the first and oldest called the main camp, had 15 to 20,000 prisoners. Auschwitz II, the second part, was the Birkenau camp and held over 9,000 prisoners in 1944. And the third, Auschwitz, had 40 subcamps exploiting the prisoners as slave laborers, which were found and mainly various sorts of German industrial plants and farms between 1942.
Between 1933 and 1945, Nazi Germany and its allies established more than 44,000 camps and other incarceration sites, including ghettos. The perpetrators and these sites for a range of purposes, including forced labor, detention of people thought to be enemies of the state, and for mass murder. In the aftermath of the Holocaust, most survivors felt like there was no future for Jews in Europe. They desired a homeland where Jews no longer were a vulnerable minority. Those hopes were realized on May 14, 1948, when the modern state of Israel was established. Many survivors were forced to live in displaced person camps when the Nazi camps were set free, where they frequently had to wait years before being able to immigrate to another country. Because of post-war violence and anti-Semitism, many people were afraid to return to their previous homes. It was often difficult to seek safety in different nations. At first, immigration overseas was really challenging.
The crimes of the Holocaust were included under crimes against humanity. The first trial took place between October and November 1946 in the German city of Nuremberg. The first international war crimes were happening in Germany and held most prominent Nazis from their crimes. In October 1946, Nuremberg trials convicted 19 of the defendants and acquitted them. Of those convicted, 19 were sentenced to death, 3 defendants were sentenced to life imprisonment, and 4 went to prison from 10 to 20 years.
The establishment of the State of Israel in May 1948, Jewish displaced persons and refugees began streaming into new sovereign state. The Nazi Holocaust engulfed millions of Jews in Europe. Then they proved a new establishment of new Jewish state. They solved the problem of Jewish homelessness by opening gates and lifting the Jewish people equality in the family of nations. In the World War, the Jewish people made a full contribution in the struggle of freedom nations against the Nazi evil. On November 29, 1947, the General Assembly of the United Nations adopted a resolution for the establishment of an independent Jewish state in Palestine and called upon the inhabitants of the country to take such steps as may be necessary on their part to put a plan into effect.
Thank you for tuning in. If you enjoyed this podcast, please feel free to like and subscribe to our channel. Until next time, keep exploring the past to understand the present.